All right, thank you all for coming in, for watching the presentation on ROI of protective guarding. We know it's a busy week for everybody that's exhibiting and presenting, so we appreciate your time. My name's Sam Tremblay. I'm Business Development Manager for Right Height. We have Aaron Conway, the President for Mezzanine Safety Gates, Dave Dulesky, the Senior VP of Sales for the US for A-Safe, and then James Augustiniak, the Regional Sales Manager for Steel King. So, agenda today, we're going to start a little bit about ProGMA, who we are, what we do, what our goals are. Talk a little bit safety by the numbers, so going into some statistics with OSHA and some accidents. ROI basics, going over some things that you can use to calculate ROI in your facility. And then we're going to break it down into 3 different categories: your people, your product, and your place. Talk a little bit about some other facility hazards, and then some final thoughts on where to get some more information. So ProGMA, who are we? We are the Protective Guarding Manufacturers Association, and we're members, the leading suppliers of fixed protective guarding designed to protect personnel, equipment, and inventory in industrial facilities. We have thousands of units installed globally between all of our 23 members that have been involved for years. We have hundreds of resources and tools available for your disposal to help you pick the right solution and solve problems within your facility. So ProGMA's mission is to promote safety, security, and guarding for people, products, and facilities. ProGMA educates about protective barriers, guarding solutions through industry standards and best practices. Our vision is to be the authoritative resource for best practices, standards, and applications of protective barrier guarding solutions and associated technologies for industrial facilities. Just a quick screenshot of our 23 members here. At the end of the presentation, we will have a slide that will show all of our members that are exhibiting here today, their booth numbers that you guys can take a picture of if there's anybody in specific you want to visit. So when we look at a high level, what is protective guarding and why you need it? So when you think of what is it and what's the purpose, it breaks down to 2 things. So it's your people and it's your product and your equipment. So for people, what we're trying to protect against is injury. The risk of impacts to a pedestrian and injury to that personnel. When we're talking about equipment, we're talking about your machinery or your production equipment or your product itself. And why you need it. You need it because of machine guarding and fall protection falls under the OSHA top 10 violations for the past 20 years. OSHA estimates that every $1 spent on safety is $6 saved, giving you a 600% ROI on investing in safety. So some forklift and OSHA statistics direct from OSHA is that they estimate between 35,000 and 62,000 injuries involving fork trucks each year. You can see on the chart, manufacturing leads that at 42% of all fatalities by industry. 36% of those fatalities involve pedestrians, meaning someone that's not on the forklift, and 42% of them involve a forklift tipping over. So obviously these are horrible statistics to see, but I know all of us have heard this in our time with the respective companies, and I think that's kind of what makes us passionate about talking about it and educating to help prevent those and hopefully give you some solutions over time to help drop that number to as close to 0 as we can. So when we break it down into the 3 categories, talking about your people, your product, and your place. At first, when you're selecting, your barrier or identifying the problem that you have in your facility, you need to identify the hazardous areas. Where is areas that are non-compliant that could be hazardous to your personnel or equipment? What resources and solutions are available? And when we're looking at these 2 first options, consulting a ProGMA member right off the bat here is a great option. I know we're all willing to come out and consult to kind of guide you in the right direction on where we see these hazardous areas. Finally, how do you select the right solution and vendor? Again, ProGMA, if you have someone that's available to consult you, it should give you the right solutions and vendor talking through those problems that you may face. Once you implement the solution, you can look at, did the implementation reduce the hazard? Also understand, was there any unidentified consequences or benefits to that solution? It may have slowed down operation, but in the same sense, you protected an incident. And finally, how do you quantify your ROI? and your return on investment. So for considerations for ROI, we're talking about people, and we're talking about injury prevention. So personnel, it's a common occurrence where personnel need access through the facility through potentially hazardous areas, whether that's the shipping receiving dock, manufacturing, production. They may be walking in the same area as forklifts, AGVs, pallet jacks, production equipment, manufacturing equipment. If they're walking along elevated surfaces, whether that be racking or mezzanines, where products could potentially fall off those elevated surfaces and strike the employee. And finally, elevated surfaces, when employees are working on those elevated surfaces, you can see on the right-hand side, it's a 2-story mezzanine with open gates. If a pedestrian were to fall off those openings, it would result in an injury, and they can range from 4 feet to 25 feet. So when you consider ROI, a single recordable incident requiring medical attention is $41,000 to the employer on average. Guarding installed in those areas can often be less than one single incident with one of those employees. So on top of the injury costs, you have days lost with employees. So this is all work-related injuries in 2022, not just forklifts, not manufacturing, all work-related injuries. 108 million days lost in 2022 due to injuries. The injuries that happened in 2022 caused 75 million days lost. Injuries from prior years that rolled into 2022 was another 33 million. And then in future years, they estimate that another 60 million days lost in future years from 2022 injuries. And there's a cost associated with those, $167 billion cost to the employers. Per worker, it's just over $1,000, and per fatality, it's just under 1.4 million. We're talking about the product, we're talking about your inventory protection. So protecting your inventory, whatever you're distributing or manufacturing. Estimates suggest that 1% to 2% of all warehouse inventory is damaged by forklifts annually. And so that's 73% of our facilities reported losses due to damaged product based on forklift impacts. So while we don't understand the value of your inventory, it could be computer chips, it could be paper towel. We don't know, but that's a good way to calculate ROI is by knowing what value of your product that you're shipping out or receiving is, because again, it could be a scenario where one single prevention of an impact could pay for the guarding itself. And not only are you protecting your product, but there could be additional consequences of delivery delays, lost contracts, lost sales. And finally, the place, talking about your facility. And this is the widest variety because there's a whole lot of things that fall into your facility. We're talking about building infrastructure. So it could be columns, it could be electrical panels, it could be your walls, it could be your floors, production equipment, manufacturing equipment, the loading docks. And this one speaks to me just from loading docks specifically. We had a customer that had a smaller facility, about 8 doors that ran 24/7. They had a door that got damaged. It was hit by a forklift. That door went down and they called us out for an emergency. It was an emergency because they told us that if their door is down every day, it costs them upwards of $20,000. Because they cannot ship product out of that door. So again, that goes into the opportunity cost of the downtime. If you strike a piece of manufacturing equipment, how long is it going to be down? Is it going to be a day? Is it going to be weeks? How long is the repair going to take? So those are all opportunity costs. And then if you continue to do this and not protect your product or your place, insurance premiums are going to increase. And then maintenance costs is directly tied to what barrier you select. So whatever barrier you may put in place to protect your place, is it going to get damaged if it gets hit? Are you going to have the replacement rail costs? Are you going to need painting and maintenance on those? If it gets hit, is there going to be concrete damage? And Dave, I know specifically you have some firsthand experience from concrete damage of what you've seen with your customers.
Yeah, I have. It goes back to just the downtime and the opportunity cost that's lost as a result of the concrete being damaged. I think it often gets overlooked, the complexity or the time with concrete damage. Quite often you see that when someone bolts down whether it's a bollard or steel guardrail or any kind of guardrail for that matter, typically put the anchors in sort of the diagonal positions on the guardrail, knowing that if it is impacted, it's going to rip up that concrete. That's just sort of a natural cause in many instances. So I at least have the other diagonal set to do that too. There's certainly preventative measures you can have to certainly, minimize or eliminate that completely. But with concrete damage in particular, if you have to replace that concrete in that section, it's not as simple as just move the barrier down, because now you're removing everything. You can't necessarily extend the barrier that simply. And concrete as a whole, for concrete to get even 75% of its intended strength or its tension, if you will, takes up to a week to cure. And for full concrete to go through the entire curing process takes up to a month. So to do it right, there are a lot of considerations need to take place in that respect.
So all things to consider when you're thinking about selecting the right barrier. So we're going to get into some specific examples into your people, your product, and your place. I'm going to pass over to Aaron Conway, who's going to talk about your people and protecting them from fall protection.
All right, thank you, Sam. I'm Aaron Conway with Mezzanine Safety Gates. Now we're going to look at some specific scenarios where you can preemptively install some protective guarding to get the best return of investment. In the material handling industry, we're trying to maximize the cube. That's where you get a good return of investment. So you're building up. You're building these structures for storage, for work platforms, production areas. And when you're building structures up, you want to make sure they're properly guarded. So you obviously want to have guard railing around the perimeter of these structures once people have access to get up there. Oftentimes, you'll have an opening in that railing where you're transferring palletized material up and down with a lift truck, and you want to make sure that those areas are properly guarded. So you always want to follow the OSHA codes whenever we're dealing with any type of fall protection hazard. For anything involving falls, it goes under OSHA code 1910 for floor openings and wall openings. And they want a barrier to be in place at all times except when you're actively moving material through there. Now, the thing about OSHA is they're covering a wide range of scenarios. They're not specifically talking about pallet drop areas. They don't specifically target scenarios like that. So I recommend people follow the ANSI standards whenever you have any question about what you should use for guarding. ANSI standards are written by professionals in the industry. They target very specific hazards and very specifically tell you how to address those hazards. You can't have an ANSI standard that violates OSHA. So if you're following ANSI, you're following OSHA. ANSI in this case has a standard involving securing pallet drop areas on elevated levels. And they want you to have what we call a dual gate system, which is a barrier that's in place at all times. What that means is you have a gate at the ledge, you have a gate behind the pallet, and the gates are interconnected, so one gate is always closed. And that way, no matter what stage of the operation you're in, loading, picking, whatever you're doing, you have a barrier in place and you're sure to meet OSHA requirements. An opening on an elevated work platform is considered an OSHA violation. That's a willful violation. That's a $15,000 fine for every opening, every time it's open. I had a customer that had a powered single gate that went up and down, and when OSHA came in for an inspection, that gate was in the open position. They said, oh, that's a violation. The inspector said, no, the person working in the plant said, no, I can just push a button and that gate closes immediately. And OSHA said, no, that's not the way it works. We come through when it's open, that's a violation. Fortunately, in that scenario, they put in a dual gate system and they abated the fine. But we're talking about these $15,000 fines for willful violations for every opening, every time they're open. And that's without someone getting hurt. I mean, if someone gets hurt, it's a whole different ballgame. You get lawyers involved. They might shut the plant down while they're investigating it. So you always want to have this protection in place, and you want to do it proactively before you have an issue. You want to consult with people at the ProGMA so what you're getting is going to fit your space constraints and what you're bringing up there in terms of material. And I tell everyone, when you're in your plant or in someone else's plant, you always want to look up. That's where these hazards come in. So we were looking at mezzanines and elevated platforms. The same hazards apply to structures made out of pallet rack, what we call pick modules. These are systems made out of pallet rack that people are working up in. They're breaking full cases and knocking them down and reducing them down into smaller packages. And those areas, if they're over 4 feet by OSHA code, they have to be guarded. They should be guarded that same way with a dual gate style system. We also have that same scenario with pallet flow lanes. A lot of times you'll see these on elevated levels where it's multiple pallets deep being pushed into a flow system, 2, 3, 4 pallets deep. If they're above 4 feet, they should be guarded. Even though people aren't working at those ledges because the pallets are flowing to them, if they have egress to those ledges, they should be guarded, and they should be guarded proactively. You can do that with a dual gate system, so there's always a gate in place, or a pallet flow gate device that's a self-closing gate that will swing open when the material flows in and then close behind them. Again, when we talk about looking up into these areas, we talk, even if people aren't up in these areas, we're maximizing the cubic space. We're building these rack structures to store products. And the concern is products coming out of there and hitting people who may be walking down below. So you want to make sure if you're storing pallets in a rack system that you have some type of barrier in the back of the racks to contain those products. The two main ways to do that is with a netting system that stretches across the width of the bay and the height of the bay, or with a steel mesh system. And what works best for you really depends on what you're storing and your process, and that's where you want to reach out to folks at the ProGMA for the best solution for that. Well, now I'm going to turn it over to Dave Dulesky, who's going to be talking more about securing utilities and facilities.
All right, thank you very much. So for my slides, really what I just discussed, just talking about sort of the gotcha areas within your facility and the impacts that can have to your business in terms of disruption. So the first area to really discuss are those utilities, I should say, your electric cabinets you have throughout the business. And I would also argue your IDF closets need to be considered in the same context, because if your network communications and telecom systems go down, it can be just as disruptive there as well. So the problem is I've got these assets in my business that I have to provide some level of protection for. Certainly my options are do nothing. Certainly don't recommend that. Let me be clear. The second option, you could probably, try to convince your forklift drivers to drive slower, or, look at warning signs. And everywhere else I've been in, that's always a challenge. So good luck with that one. I'll just say that. You could reroute your traffic, all right? That's certainly an option, but not necessarily always practical, right? Because now you've just perhaps lengthened the amount of time it takes to get from point A to point B, and in doing so, you've decreased your operational efficiency, right? Can't go as fast as you need to be able to get product either to the other side of the facility or to the loading dock quickly, so you have some impact. Really, the option here is provide that protective guardrail in front of that, because there's some serious, very measurable downtimes that can impact your business. I was at a facility of an automotive plant that manufactures 350 vehicles per day. All right, 2 shifts, 16 hours. They say their average car value, nice vehicles, about $60,000 per vehicle. It's just simple math at that point. 350 cars, 60,000 over 16 hours. You're looking at, if downtime of a simple hour of taking out electricity within one element of the plant has an impact of about $1.3 million per hour for this particular customer if their networks or their electricity was impacted and it's down. I was thinking, okay, well, they've certainly got backups and reassurances in place for UPSs and stuff, but it is a very serious thing within your business that you need to consider. Second is protecting the building itself. All right, displayed here, I've got certainly a door entryway with some bollards protecting that. This is a very common place where we see areas being impacted, damage to the door itself, which has all sorts of implications. Forklift drivers driving too fast around the curve, take out the impact. Maybe it's a pinch point. Forklift drivers coming together, and one accidentally goes a little too far to one side. Well, the consequences of that, can be quite significant. Some examples. Again, options are really very similar to before. Do nothing, tell your forklift drivers to drive slower. Again, my personal recommendation is install that protective guarding for that to prevent this, because as simple as it sounds, this can be a pretty cost-effective solution against other consequences and cost considerations to take place. Identified about 12 different cost considerations and areas you need to have for this. Is it a high traffic area, low traffic area? Do I have to shut down this area to be able to, provide that maintenance and repair if I do nothing? I've seen instances where tuggers have gone completely through walls. This actually just happened recently in an airport in Florida, unfortunately. I've seen consequences where a forklift has actually taken its forks and gone directly through steel I-beam. It happens, right? And you're nodding your head, you agree. So yes, we are talking about door jambs, door frames and so forth, but there's some serious implications to the building structure and integrity itself, where if I impact that, nothing's saying that this isn't going to crumble, and now I don't have access from one side of building to another. I may not have access and impact things, from a safety perspective. All right, did I just, limit the ability for an evacuation route through my building if there's a fire, maybe chemicals are spilled? What is that repair and maintenance cost? All these things to take in consideration. Additionally, what is the cost of the repair? What is the cost of putting that in? The delays, if I can't get from point A to point B that we talked about before, your lost opportunity cost and downtime, the congestion, having vehicles maybe have to go red light, green light, and stop, and not just doing a continuous movement. Lastly, the workplace itself. Have you impacted your employees and, again, their overall safety? From my side, kind of the intervention here and the quick call to action is there's 23 members within ProGMA. I would encourage you to come and talk to any of us, and we can provide you a risk assessment for your facility, right? Ultimately, I think what we're trying to minimize is risk, whether it's risk off a mezzanine, risk of product placement, which Jim will come talk to. It's about minimizing risk. Once you minimize risk, we can improve or at minimum maintain operational efficiency. And I would argue that safety is a byproduct of that. You get safety for free by doing everything else right. I'm going to turn it over to Jim.
Thank you, Dave. That was great information you had there. Just a few things I just want to regurgitate here that came from some of our other speakers here when talking about protecting your product and inventory is some of the stats that were brought up. 1 to 2% of your inventory typically is damaged on average. 73% of that damage caused by forklift. So, and also ROI on safety, 6 to 1 safety dollars. So 600% savings. So, it's a no-brainer to see the savings in this. And you'll see some things here that you'll realize that, a much higher ROI you could experience on those. And an experience I've had with a customer, he brought us in to assess their rack damage that they had. They were having a lot of repairs done. And they had actually created a monthly budget of $7,500. So 12 months, that's 90 grand they had for rack repair. And at the same time, they had this contractor in this facility a lot longer than they should be, and they should have been covered under their liability insurance. So there was risk of their insurance, some issue with their insurance, as well as damage to the inventory. So what we did, we introduced a couple products, one attached to the rack, and then some guarding here, just like this. And what that did for him, it eliminated practically all of his damage. He was able to eliminate that $7,500 a month budget, experience that instant savings, and at the same time cut down on his damage tremendously. Now, of course, there's still going to be a little damage, but at this time it's very limited. They don't have the contractors in-house every day or every week, so they've eliminated that risk and that liability. Again, protecting your inventory, your product. That's your profit center, your revenue source. So, here's a situation. You've got all your product running through these systems, these conveyors. If that gets damaged, that is a lot of downtime, weeks of downtime there. So just a simple barrier will keep that protected. Protecting operations where you're building inventory. So here's a assembly and inspection area. This is going to keep your product a little more secure, organized, and also provide a little safety from impact there. As you can see, the high dollar inventory, you can see here with a very economical solution here, some very stout guardrail. And this just happened to be at the Corvette Museum down in Kentucky, Bowling Green, Kentucky. The situation here, I don't know if any of you have heard of this story, but they had a sinkhole in here and they lost a lot of these classic Corvettes to that sinkhole. So when they repaired it, they had us come out and do that guardrail for them. And of course, they like the red color over the typical yellow, but they thought it were pretty sharp. So you can see the ROI that they're going to have there in that situation. Oh, I'm going to go back one. Sorry about that. So when you're putting in some of these protective measures, in my situation, I'm talking about inventory, but some of this equipment can have a triple effect. If you have netting on the back of a rack, that's going to keep that product from falling down and getting damaged. It's going to also keep that product from falling down and injuring a person. It's going to keep that product from falling down and damaging your facility. So, again, as these guys have mentioned, reach out to your ProGMA members. We can help with your assessment, with your solutions, and show you these return on investments. I'll turn this back over to Aaron for final words. Sam?
Perfect. Just some final thoughts here. So costs associated with the incidents can be a function of lost productivity, lost litigation, fees, citations, and injury expenses. Installing and maintaining the appropriate protective guarding in your facility can protect your people, your product, and your place. And oftentimes, protective guarding are often less expensive than one singular incident. As they've all mentioned, consult your ProGMA professionals. Evaluate your specific applications and problems. We can talk through some solutions. So if anybody needs pictures, here is all the ProGMA members at ProMat exhibiting with their booth numbers. Right Height, Mezzanine Safety Gates, A-Safe, and Steel King are all here, all within about 5 booths from each other. So, and again, if you wouldn't mind scanning the QR code, taking the survey, let you know what you thought. And then if anybody else needs additional information, all of our information is listed on the left, along with our booth numbers for each of our companies. So at this point, we'll take any questions. Not all at once.
So Sam, are most of your customers receptive to your safety measures that you suggest to them? I mean, do they see the benefit pretty quick?
For sure. I think there's plenty of options. They like to go through kind of good, better, best scenarios of what we can provide, the benefits of each one. They're more receptive to that than just telling them what they need, but giving them some options of what could benefit them. Anyone?
Please make sure you get that barcode or get that code copied or the image and come visit us the rest of the show.
I just wanted to, we got a question. Go ahead.
I'm assuming on all your installation manuals, you have a recommendation for anchoring the product. What responsibility is on the owner for the condition of the concrete or any type of, I guess you would need a structural engineer for impactability? I mean, does that make sense?
So I heard 2 questions there.
Yeah.
The first one was about installation manuals and instructions and such about the anchoring. And just speaking on behalf of A-Safe, yes, we definitely provided the instructions and we'll tell you, you need to provide this much pounds per square inch of torque to be able to fasten it to the concrete or asphalt, if the case may be, depending on the actual application. The second question was more about the condition of the concrete, I think is what you asked, and the responsibility of the owner. Was that the?
Yeah, so if you recommend that type of anchor in the concrete,
Yep.
is there any responsibility on the end user to verify that, you're promoting your impactability? Do they have?
What we ask is we're going to have enough depth, if you will, of the concrete to be able to anchor in the either the compression anchors or concrete screws that we provide, there's going to be a specified depth, and it varies by product, but it could be up to about 6 inches of depth of what we're looking for. We'll need to know if rebar is in place, all right? That's an important consideration. In addition, really just, we would be looking for something that is not, chewed up and has a whole bunch of holes in it, because ultimately that has messed with the integrity of the concrete itself, and it could jeopardize the impact rating of that and such. So if we do come out and do a site assessment. We can certainly recommend a third party do the install. A-Safe doesn't provide that. You can do it yourself. We can train your own teams, your own maintenance teams, or recommend someone. But ultimately, that's part of the assessment that we would provide to say this concrete's in good shape or something needs to change.
Thank you for that question.
Anyone else? Any other questions? I just wanted to reiterate the advantage of putting in these protective measures proactively. You want to be proactive and not reactive. That's when you're getting the best return of investment. You're putting the right solution in because you're taking the time to consult with manufacturers, like in the ProGMA. They can come out and they can assess what you have going on. You can put the right product in. Where when you're reactive, first of all, there's going to be fines and fees, and you're dealing with a mess, and then you're just scrambling around to get a solution in there, and inevitably it's going to be the wrong solution because you're just trying to put something quickly in there. So proactive is a very important part of the ROI equation to have the right solution in place.
Any other questions? All right, thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
coming
everybody.
out.